Hello everyone and welcome to the channel. I'm Emmanuel, I'm an airline pilot and a PMDG 777 beta tester. In today's video I want to address a question that I keep hearing every now and then from you in the community, and that's about the engine ratings. So some 777s show the climb rating in the cruise and some 777s show a cruise rating in the cruise. Now, why is that? Why is there a difference? And well, since you're on this particular channel, let's of course discuss which ratings exist in general and what they all stand for. Okay, we're going to start with the basic question here. So which engine ratings exist in total? And the answer is that there are only 3 official ratings, which the aircraft manufacturer has to certify with the authority. And that is the takeoff rating, go-around rating, and maximum continuous thrust. So in general, a jet engine can only produce so much thrust until it would take damage from either overheat or rotational forces inside the engine or whatever. Now, in order to save money and save weight, engines are of course built as fragile as possible. So they really try to make them only about as strong as they really need to be in order to be able to keep up with the stress that they are designed to take. Now, for this reason, the engines are normally built in a way that the maximum continuous thrust they can take is less than a certain amount of thrust that it can take for a short burst. So, for example, during takeoff or go-around. Now, for this reason, maximum takeoff thrust is normally certified for a maximum of 5 minutes only. If you run the engine on that setting for longer than 5 minutes, the manufacturer does not assure you that the engine might not blow up. Obviously, in the real world, there is quite a bit more margin, and you can certainly run those engines for longer before they blow up, but it's no longer assured to you, so you would take your own risk there. Some engine manufacturers offer a longer takeoff thrust certification for 10 minutes if the airline pays extra. You know that game, do you? So that's our first certified rating, maximum takeoff thrust. Then we have maximum go-around thrust, which basically is the same as maximum takeoff thrust, however corrected for the higher speed during a go-around. And then is our third certified rating, and this is where we get towards the question asked for our tutorial, and that is maximum continuous thrust. Now, maximum continuous thrust, you can see that one marked with the amber indicator on our N1 gauges up here. That is the maximum power at which the engine can run for an indefinite amount of time. It is normally only used during cases of emergency or where really needed. Say, for example, because of an engine failure during takeoff, or for example, because of significant turbulence that makes it difficult to keep your speed in flight. But this limit is not normally used during takeoff or go-around. And these are the only 3 ratings for which the aircraft is certified. You might have noticed that neither climb nor cruise has been mentioned over here. And there is a very good reason for that. The reason is that these ratings are basically, well, let's call them money-saving ratings. So, maximum climb thrust usually is pretty close to maximum continuous thrust. Depending on the engine, they might even be equal at higher altitude. So, let's go ahead and have a look how that works in our 777. You can access the thrust limit page through the init reference page, then pressing thrust limit down here. You can see right now we are flying with the climb limit set. Now let's change this over to maximum continuous. You can see that they are more or less equal at high altitude. At lower altitudes this may be different. So why not use maximum continuous straight away then? Well, the general idea is to keep the engine temperatures under a certain margin by limiting the maximum amount of thrust that the engine can produce. By keeping the engine cooler, you reduce the wear and tear on the engine, therefore you extend the lifespan, and many authorities will grant you more engine runtime in between the mandatory inspection intervals. Now, this principle can be taken even further by introducing a cruise rating. So, if we have a look at this now, climb gives us 100.3%, and now if we change to cruise, you can see that we're losing about 4% N1. And this, of course, further limits the upper scale of the EGT when the engine runs at the maximum certified thrust. And this further reduces the stress on the engine, and therefore increases the maintenance intervals, and by increasing the interval, in turn you of course reduce cost. And that is the entire idea of the cruise rating of the aircraft. Now, some airlines fit cruise as standard, while others are using climb as standard. Now, why is there a difference in between the two? And why would any airline opt for climb instead of cruise if cruise saves money? Well, the problem we have to face here is the available thrust at a certain N1. Many flight simmers seem to think that, for example, 88.1% N1 would equal 88.1% thrust, but that is an incorrect assumption. The relationship between N1 and thrust output from the engine is not linear, and that can be very well seen for engines equipped with an EPR gauge, because EPR basically is your thrust, and you will notice that in order to achieve a certain change in EPR, there will be quite a different relationship with the N1 values. Now, to make it easy, the amount of thrust that the engine puts out is not equal to the N1, but if we take, for example, the climb limit of 100.3 and compare that with a cruise limit of 96.1, the difference is not just 4% in thrust, the difference is more closer to like 10% of thrust in the higher engine ratings. So in the higher N1 ratings, or rather in the higher N1 numbers, we really can only call it a number because there is no unit attached to the N1. So in the higher N1 numbers, a change from 96.1 to 100.4 may be as much as 10% of thrust output. And if you think about it, 10% of thrust is quite a lot, and there have been cases in the past with airlines that were equipped with a cruise rating to save that thrust, where the aircraft encountered turbulence, the speed started to drop into the amber band, and from there the pilots did not have sufficient thrust available to power the aircraft out of it without starting a descent in order to trade altitude for airspeed. And there has been a case where an airliner actually entered a stall and lost 20,000 feet of altitude. And in the aftermath, in the investigation, it was found that that airline has been using the cruise limit rather than the climb limit. Now, any airline that uses the cruise limit will instruct their pilot that if you enter turbulence, if it becomes obvious that more thrust may need to be used, manually select maximum continuous on the thrust limit page in order to increase the thrust again. However, in that particular case, for reasons that I do not know, I would guess probably it just became too busy. You know, you're entering severe turbulence, you are being thrown around in the cockpit, you try to control the aircraft somehow, which starts losing airspeed and starts getting close to a stall. It can certainly become easy to forget setting max continuous. And ever since that serious incident happened, that particular airline, even though it was by default fitted with a cruise rating, demanded their pilots, as soon as they reach the top of climb, manually select maximum continuous thrust so that full thrust is always available. So that's our basic trade-off over here. We can reduce our cost by increasing maintenance intervals by going for the cruise thrust rating. However, that comes at the risk that in case a situation like the one described happens where the airspeed drops, you're in severe turbulence, it's very hard to control the airplane at all, well, it might be very easy to simply forget selecting the higher thrust rating. Therefore, you end up with less thrust than your engine can produce, and the result is a very unnecessary trade of altitude for airspeed. Either intentional, if the pilot can initiate a controlled descent, or unintentional, and that one we most definitely want to avoid. So that's the trade-off that airlines have to decide between when they make their decision on the rating to install in their aircraft. And that is why some aircraft are fitted with a cruise rating in cruise, and why other aircraft are fitted with a climb rating in the cruise. Now certainly for us pilots the climb rating is the nicer one, because it basically provides us with an additional safety margin, and we don't pay for the fuel, so for that reason the only downside, and for the maintenance of course, for that reason the only downside for us pilots doesn't really matter. That's up to the airline. Well, and that's it. That's why some aircraft are fitted with a climb limit, while other airlines or aircraft are fitted with a cruise limit. I do hope you found this one interesting. Let me know in the comments below. I'm very much looking forward to your feedback on this one. And in the meantime, be sure to like, comment and subscribe. And if you really love what I'm doing on this channel, I would appreciate a small donation through the Buy Me Coffee link in the video description below. Thank you for watching, and see you all again on the next one.